We literally had just raised our first $3 million, and we had to spend almost $2 million of that to defend ourselves against a wrongful death lawsuit. So that's the other thing I'll tell you is like, whatever you think your business is going to be and where it goes, they're wildly different. So get ready for the ride.
This is Mark Gainey, co-founder of Strava, a $2.2 billion fitness platform that turned running and cycling into a global social network with over 150 million users.
Look, AI right now can do so many things, and it's so capable. So it might be a problem focusing onto a niche. Is this a wrong way of thinking about it?
Vision is important. So where you believe you can get to, but separate that out from go-to-market and how you go to market. And if you don't understand who you're building for, it's a tremendous risk.
Probably in our space, Strava is the best in the world in removing things and simplifying things. And how do you optimize for having the only feature that is useful for that?
Part of how we did it was we initially started with everything but the kitchen sink. And then we were ruthless at watching not just what our customers were saying, but the way in which they were interacting with it. And we started that cutting process.
What's the best way of raising money, raising funding for their business?
Speed over greed. Like, you don't have to own the whole thing to somehow do really well. The first offer we had was $300,000 for 40% of the business. And we managed to get $700,000 for 40% of the business. 4 years later, and only 2 rounds of financing later, we had a company worth $10 billion. So despite selling 40% of the business, my little slice that was still left was pretty damn good.
When it comes to storytelling, Mark, you are, if not the best in the world, one of the best in the world in this. So how would you advise people how to learn, how to speak to customers, how to speak to investors?
Okay.
We're beyond excited to have Mark here to share insights from his journey building the biggest fitness and exercise app in the world. We also invited Kyriakos. He's a founder of Terra API, helping developers and companies leverage health data through wearables and sensors. So everyone, please give it up for Mark and Kyriakos.
Hello, guys. So,
a lot of people in here.
There's a lot of people. How many of you are using Strava?
Oh,
everyone.
Thank you very much. Just made my day.
So, how many of you are cyclists? How many runners? What about weightlifting? Oh, what else? Is like surfing, anyone? Oh, windsurfing maybe?
There we
go. It was
go.
less and less.
There we go. Oh yeah.
Okay.
How many pay for the app? Okay. That's okay. We can talk about that one.
Super. Just to give you an introduction, guys, Mark studied at Harvard, and then he was also a track and cross runner, joined the crew rowing team. After he left from Harvard, he joined TA Associates, then started a company called Kana, which is, he became a public company at $11 billion valuation. And then he left and started Strava, which is, has 125 million users around the world, if not more these days.
150.
150, wow. And then is the leading digital community, of athletes, globally. So, thanks a lot for coming, Mark.
Of course. It's my pleasure.
For the first question, I wanted to ask you, because everybody in this room is today here for the AI event. You started in the previous, era, when the internet started. And then, so can you give us like your view about how the company building changed when you started with Kana, then with Strava, and then to today?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot in there. Well, first up, I'll start by saying thanks for having me. Thanks for coming to listen. This is going to be really fun. I would start by, I am so jealous of all of you right now, just because this AI moment feels very much like, frankly, when I was your age. I'm a dinosaur. I'll admit it right now, 57 years old. But when I started my first company, it was 25, early 90s. And the internet literally was just starting. Like there were no companies on it. It was coming out of DARPA. It was a defense thing. And here we were starting to learn how to build companies. So I haven't felt personally like I did back then since now. So just awesome time. Yes, there's a lot of scary stuff going on as well, but wow, what a great time to be thinking about being a builder. To answer your questions, I'll give you just one example of a difference. When we were delivering software in 1997, 1998, if we delivered a new version twice a year, that was a big deal. Like the idea of even being SaaS really didn't exist. You literally delivered your software on a disk to a customer in their facility on their servers. And then we had engineers who would stay on site to hit the reset button on the server because we had so many bugs that it would go off. So the idea of development, the idea of sort of bringing software to market was arcane compared to today. I mean, Strava probably does multiple releases a day at times. And I think with AI, what we're seeing is not just the speed, but we're seeing the rate at which the team size and everything else is just sort of rapidly changing. So for me, that's the number one thing I would say is just the time to market and our ability to iterate was so different back then.
And then what about technology? How did cloud change things, and how did new technologies change how you started companies and build companies?
So I just mentioned, speed to market and our ability to iterate, this idea. I mean, personally, I love software versus hardware. Software, you can test something. If it doesn't work, you can roll it back. That was not the case in 1995, 96, 97. I mean, again, you were putting it on a disk. So I'd argue that ability to be iterative, to be creative has only gotten better. The speed at which you can bring things has only increased. Those are the differences. The things that are the same, I mean, and this is where I have mixed feelings around sort of what AI can do. You and I were talking a bit offline. If I were building for businesses, I really like what AI can do because so much of the business functions that are out there, they're very binary. They're very sort of function oriented. And so I like how AI can get in and improve the speed and improve accuracy and so forth. My world at Strava and the consumer base, there's a big piece of that is the connection to the consumer. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that our ability to sort of relate to who we're trying to build for, how the company can support our customers, which goes beyond just the product. One thing I always caution entrepreneurs is don't forget that what you're trying to do is actually build a business, not just a product. And I think those things haven't changed. Our ability to think about our employees and what they need to be successful, the ability to think about our shareholders and our investors, that hasn't changed. So I think the fundamentals around sort of what encapsulates a great product, which is the business itself, I've felt a consistency there across, at this point, the decades that I've been doing this. But just the speed is amazingly different.
Mm. And can we get into your shoes in the very early days of Strava? How did things start? How did you come up with the idea?
So the idea was born out of a very simple mission, which was Michael and I, my co-founder, we've always had this belief that when we're active, we're frankly just better people. And we had known that because we went all the way back to when we were in school, when we were college students and we were on the crew team together. In the thick of racing season was when my grades were at their best. I was most efficient. There's just a bunch of things that proved to me it's like, okay, this really works. And frankly, it was an amazing experience to be part of a team, to be competing, the trash talking, the camaraderie, everything that sort of came with being on that. The problem was we graduated and poof, that whole thing disappeared. So ironically, we had a business plan in 1995 that was the original Strava. We were just a little early with the idea. We pivoted into the email company that you described earlier. But the thesis remained the same. And so when we launched it in 2009, it was this idea of if we brought people together, would they help us remain active? Because if we're active, we do well. So that was the mission and remains that way today. Why do as I was joking earlier, why aren't you paying? Frankly, we love our free members because our free members are contributing to the community. They're supporting one another. They're keeping people active. They're contributing data. They're contributing their posts, which we can then create great features from. So in our case, our free members are not just a marketing opportunity. They truly are sort of the heart and soul of the community. Now, how do we get started? That's a different question, right? That's when we really, this is one bias that you're going to learn from me as an entrepreneur. I love the niche. I love going after a very targeted audience. And I've been accused of creating companies that really aren't companies. They're barely products. In the case of Kana, which is our first one, we were building to respond to customer email. If a company got a customer email that came in with a question, was our system capable of helping that company answer it? We were told by investors, you're not a product, you're barely a feature. But what they were missing was that in the birth of the internet, there was not a single company that could figure out how to answer their customer email. And so it was a very specific problem, particularly for anybody going online for the first time. And so that little wedge into our customer base allowed us to then rapidly grow, as you said, to a public company worth over $10 billion. In the case of Strava, for those of you who don't know, we started with a very focused audience. It was something called a mammal, M-A-M-I-L. You may know them at Hybrid. It's a middle-aged man in Lycra. That was our target audience, that road cyclist who absolutely is addicted to going out on their bike 3, 4, 5 days a week. And that's who we targeted. Not because we thought that was going to be where we grew the whole business, but by having a go-to-market strategy that was focused on a very key audience, we could build a loyalty and build sort of an enthusiasm and an engagement for the product that would then give us the confidence to expand. So vision was to support a global community of athletes, which we're doing today, but our go-to-market was hyper-focused. Again, to the point where investors accused us of being a hobby, not a real business.
I think we discussed this in the past, but is there at any point that big niche is the wrong advice, would you say? Because we had this debate the other day, internal Intel actually, and it was all about, look, AI right now can do so many things and it's so capable. So it might be a problem focusing onto a niche. So is this a wrong way of thinking about it?
I'm going to defend the niche to the end, but it doesn't mean you always get the niche right. So I can separate those two. The one that I love to use, just because, again, it was near and dear to me. I am old enough and went to the school where Facebook was literally a Facebook. When I showed up my freshman year, I got a book and it had my picture in it, where I was from and what dorm I lived in. And we all quickly opened it up to figure out who are our friends and who's going to be. And that's what it was. And when Mark then launched that in the early 2000s, it was focused on a niche, which was the college student, to create an online version of that Facebook. Now, I remember also thinking when he then opened it up to the rest of the world, that's a stupid idea. Why isn't he staying focused on his niche? So I will agree that there's a point in time where you have to think about expansion. And in fact, we went through the good and the bad of doing that at Strava. After 3 or 4 years on the cyclist, we launched into running, and then we began out, and I think there's 50 different sports you can do on Strava today. That has been it's been good for the business, but it's also been challenging. But no, I think, again, vision is important. So where you believe you can get to, but separate that out from go to market and how you go to market. And if you don't understand who you're building for, there's tremendous risk.
And was the vision for Strava the same from the beginning, or did it expand after you saw the first success with customers?
No, actually, the first business plan is pretty consistent even today, 16, almost 17 years later, in the sense that it was a very basic premise. So we really did believe in this idea that, again, I mentioned earlier, if I'm active, I'm a better person, but it's really hard to stay active. Well, how do you stay active? When you have teammates, when you have other people. So the thesis was, if we could build community around working out, good things would happen, both for our members as well as for the company itself. That has remained true. I think what has changed or evolved were things that we just hadn't anticipated. 82% of our members are outside the U.S. And that's been that way from almost day one. So any of you who are thinking about launching online, you will be an international company before you're prepared to do it. And this goes right back to sort of, I think AI can be helpful on that front, but you have to be careful, because I can tell you the lessons we've learned are very nuanced around culture and the way in which sport relates to people's daily lives. It's very different in a place like Brazil versus the UK versus Germany versus Tokyo. So until we really started to understand those nuances, we made a lot of mistakes.
Can we get into the product in the early days and how did it evolve over time?
Well, again, I'm going to date myself. When we started Strava, we were a website, and the only way that you could upload was by buying a Garmin device, plugging it into the back of your computer, and literally uploading that ride, a fit file, onto your computer. Pretty arcane. And we did that.
It works with my Garmin today, actually.
Oh, yeah. It was, so that was 2009. In 2011, we launched our first app. I won't walk you through all the mistakes we made, but fundamentally we were hoping that by launching an app, we would have a lower cost means of people to be able to upload. What we didn't anticipate was if you downloaded the Strava app, that would be the only place you'd ever spend any time on Strava, was in the app. We assumed that you would just use it to track your run or your ride. And then you'd go to our beautiful website and see all the wonderful features that we had. So we had to then become very mobile first in the 2010, 11, 12. So that was the next chapter for Strava. When we launched into a new sport, we launched 2 separate apps. So we were so worried about our cycling community that we actually launched Strava Run as a separate app in the App Store. And we tried to run 2 apps simultaneously. In hindsight, probably really stupid, but again, we were so protective of our customer that we didn't want our cyclists to in any way feel that we were dismantling their experience. And over time, we've been able to bring those together. I could keep going, but the big changes for us, moving from web to mobile, moving into multi-sport, moving into international, understanding that, the economics of the business, the fact that it's a subscription business, adding our partners in. Today there's a sizable business in Strava where the brands and other technology companies can participate, not just through the API, but through economics and so forth. And so that's been a big learning curve for us. And now AI. Thankfully just so you know, caveat, I've retired from Strava as of January, 16 years, and I'm out. So I'm not totally clear on all the things that they're doing right now, but I know that the AI chapter has got the whole team super excited.
Speaking of Garmin in the early days, I'm sure you faced the kind of maybe the dinosaur that Garmin was at the time. It's a very big company. I suspect that you had problems with them early on because you're a startup. You're trying to work with a really big company. Did you actually get to understand them once Strava became really big and why they were behaving in that way?
So again, I've retired, so they may understand them well today. At Strava, in the 16 years I was there, the answer is no. But I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just 2 businesses that have sort of leaned heavily on each other, but I don't think have ever had the, tightest strategic relationship out there. When we started, we were so excited because it was really clear we could sell a lot of Garmin devices for them. The only way you could use Strava was with a Garmin device. No other device out there. And so we wanted to be a reseller. We just simply we'll buy them at wholesale and we'll resell. They told us no, we're not comfortable with that. We're worried you're going to ruin our retail channel, a handful of problems. So we had to go to Costco, and actually 2 problems. First thing we did was we went to eBay to buy a bunch of Garmin's, from some sellers, and we got totally fleeced. I think we lost like $10,000 in Garmin's because people told us they were going to sell them to us and they never showed up. So then we went to Costco, a much more trustworthy place, and we were buying literally Garmin's at like a 40% discount and then reselling those to our friends. That's the way we started our Garmin relationship. What happened over time wasn't through any kind of long conversation. It was the simple fact that they realized when it said on the box compatible with Strava, the boxes sold much better than when it didn't. And they realized, there's an interesting sort of relationship here where we can sell a whole lot more hardware. And we also were very clear to them from day one, we will not be in the hardware business. We're not trying to compete with you. So ultimately we ended up in a really good place, but that's years in the making. Patience. And to all of you out there, as much as we want to go full speed, and you're going to hear just speed is your king, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about how speed is something that is only getting faster right now. I will also preach the 3 Ps, patience, persistence, and perspective, but patience to get the stuff right.
How did understanding customers change over time from the early days to today? Like, I suspect if one builds today's Strava, for example, they would spend a lot of time in cycling shops and speaking to users directly. Whereas in the much bigger scale, you have much bigger experiments with so many users. How do these things change on the different stages?
Yeah, well, this is why I envy the entrepreneur who's really just starting their business, because I do like that simplicity of, I'm going to go find that one target audience and go just do something great for them. Michael and I always had this thesis that we'd rather be great than big. And it was sort of a little bit duplicitous, because if we're great, we can get big, right? It was sort of that mindset. But what happens is, you're right, as we grew, all of a sudden it's like playing three-dimensional chess, because number one, the international component, which I've mentioned a couple of times, you have to be very cognizant that the way in which someone relates to in our case, to their sport or their activity is just different country to country. And so how do you pick up on that nuance, and what features do you need to build? The second piece of it is sport to sport. Perfect example, cyclists they're just historically very social. They tend to go out and they'll ride together and so forth, but they're not typically training for something. Of course, there are those who train for races and, the tour riders and so forth. But a lot of cyclists really they enjoy being on their bike, and they enjoy doing it in social settings. It's like the new golf is what you hear. Runners are training for something, whether it's their 5K or a marathon. They tend to they're creatures of habit. I'm a runner, so please, like, I'm not being, again, it's like I got that same 3 or 4 routes I do for my home. So just the experience in Strava alone had to radically change. One of the biggest mistakes we made was that we thought that we could take our Strava cycling experience, reskin it with some great UI, and sell it to our runners. Totally failed. It wasn't until we brought running DNA into the company, hired great runners who were also great engineers and marketing people and product people, that we really started to build something that felt authentic for the run community. So sport threw us off, international threw us off. And then the last thing I'll say is, just again, this is unique to our customer, but I think any of you should be thinking about this. Even within a particular sort of country or sport, you have different motivations. There are those who, early on at Strava, we were always told, I'm not good enough to be on Strava. I'm not competitive enough to be on Strava. And we'd look at the data and keep explaining to people, just look at my profile. I am not fast. I am not, but people really felt like there was this high hurdle to participate. And it took us years to start to understand personas where somebody who isn't necessarily competitive, but believes deeply in the importance of working out every day. And so what are the features we have to build for them? So good news is, can you almost guarantee for any of your businesses, there's a long roadmap that will last years. Don't look at that as a bad thing. Look at that as just a great thing that means that you've got plenty of runway in your business, which is what we've seen at Strava. We've got 10 more years of stuff we're still trying to build.
We also spoke in the past about this concept of via negativa, about removing things instead of adding. And there is this myth when starting a company that you need to keep adding features on top of the product and make it more useful to people and keep piling up all of these. I think probably in our space, Strava is the best in the world in removing things and simplifying things and making the experience of the users better. So can we speak a little bit about how do you optimize for having the only feature that is useful for that?
Well, first off, I would say you're being exceptionally kind right now, because I would have a very different take on sort of where we've gotten to and frankly, still sort of the elimination process that I think the team is trying to go through to really understand the usability of the app. Full disclosure, it was about 2 weeks ago, I discovered a feature in the app that I didn't even know existed. And it was both good news and bad news. It was something I really liked, had to do with routes, but the fact that it was buried in there just spoke volumes around the fact that this is actually really important and super hard to find. It's a very powerful statement that, as somebody who's now built a couple of software companies and advises a lot of folks, it is probably the idea of actually editing and reducing that user interface is one of the hardest things that any of us has to do as an entrepreneur. How have we done it? The irony is, if you go back and look at our very first website we ever built, there are still features on that 15 years later that we haven't yet implemented on now the Strava that is everybody knows commercially. So part of how we did it was we initially started with everything but the kitchen sink. And then we were ruthless at watching not just what our customers were saying, but the way in which they were interacting with it. And we started that cutting process. That worked really well early. Then we had another forcing function, which was when we went to mobile. So you guys are all already there. But when you went from a footprint that was a website down to a mobile, it forced us into another sort of cutting exercise or reduction exercise. So I think we built sort of that muscle during that period, and that's where we developed that reputation. But I can tell you that the sausage factory behind the scenes and how many features are still buried in there that you can't get to, it's embarrassingly high. Yeah. And I mean that in the best way. Like the team tries hard, but it's tough.
And then it's, I'm sure everyone in this room would be very interested into fundraising. And would be very interesting to see your, the early days. How did you approach investors? And then how did it change after different rounds? And then what would you advise people here? What's the best way of raising, money, raising funding for their business?
Just for context, so I have been fortunate. The two companies that I've built in the kind of days we raised, we did 3 rounds prior to taking the company public. So that one was quick. That was in 4 years' time. We went from 2 guys and a dog to 1,200 employees and a public company. That was, the key rounds were led by folks like Benchmark and others. So we know the venture community well. At Strava, our large shareholders are groups like Sequoia Capital and TCV. So we know them. I've gotten to know them well. Strava's been through 16 years. I think we've been through 6 rounds of financing. I've lost track. We've probably, in terms of total dollars, we're actually still pretty small compared to a lot of stuff in the Valley. I think we've raised, in terms of primary capital, sort of capital into the business, we've raised probably 100, probably close to 200 at this point. And then we've done some secondary work. So that's just the history. 16 years with both, early investors as well as sort of your classic, venture and private equity. Now, here's the history. First off, trying to raise, particularly in the fitness sector, don't kid yourself. I don't care whether it was 2009 or 2025. It's hard. People want to understand the TAM. Imagine going to them and saying, our target is mammals, these road cyclists, and then trying to explain TAM. It was falling on deaf ears. That's why we were accused of being a hobby. That's when we kept saying, go-to-market vision. Here's a vision. If we believe that 10% of the world's population is active and there's 7 billion people out there, there is somewhere between 500 and 1 billion people who are active right now. That's a big market, right? So we played a lot with that math just to get people out there and understanding it. The second thing that worked really well for Strava was we had to identify people who weren't just great investors, but they were active people themselves. They had to understand the domain. And if you look through the first 4 or 5 financings, every one of those financings, whether it was led by a firm you've never heard of or it was led by Sequoia Capital was Mike Moritz. He made the investment. He's an avid cyclist. He's a triathlete. He was on Strava, enjoyed the experience, and he got it. He understood it. Whereas I can tell you a number of his partners did not, and they were hugely skeptical. But he had the will and he had the ability to get the deal done. So he did. Find those people who understand your space and believe in it. And if they don't, move on. Don't take it personally, but don't waste your time. It's not worth it. The last one I'll tell you, Kyriakos, is just, I always joke, speed over greed. And I really mean this. I'll give you one example. The Kana business that I built in the 90s. So here's some math for you. When we did our Series A, we raised, the first offer we had was $300,000 for 40% of the business. And we're like, wow. Now I was 25. I had no operating experience. I had a degree in art history. I'd never run a company before. So I walked out of that meeting and I thought, somebody wants to give us money, but I also think they're robbing us. So we went back and we negotiated really hard and we managed to get $700,000 for 40% of the business. So we sold 40% of our business in the Series A. Now that's the bad news. The good news was 4 years later and only 2 rounds of financing later, we had a company worth $10 billion So despite selling 40% of the business, let's just say that my little slice that was still left was pretty damn good. So speed over greed. Like, you don't have to own the whole thing to somehow do really well. And I think that that's sometimes we get lost in the reason we want to sort of optimize every little thing. But if you found a great partner that you know and can trust, that you think can add value, and they're being fair. So that's the one thing is you'll see these investors try to throw everything but the kitchen sink into their terms. That's not who you want to do business with. You want to do business with somebody. The economics might be a little tough. The markets are going to tell you what the values are right now. It's not rocket science. But if they're trying to throw in all kinds of prefer and this and that and everything, and they're going to put these restrictions on who you can hire and when, they don't trust you. You shouldn't trust them. So I go for a partner that I know I can trust, who's going to have my back, who has great references, and let's just go do a fair deal and let's go. Because the sooner you get them off of the negotiating side of the table and onto your side of the table, really good things happen. I've been really fortunate. I mean, my partners have been outstanding. They're 16 years in at Strava and not a single investor has sold a share. Now I think they're pretty happy with the growth, and that's probably why, but it's still a testament to the fact that, they are long-term holders.
And from a product perspective, the Strava from cycling and running expanding into so many other. So even I can put my windsurfing. I see my windsurfing lately there. But how can you keep being authentic and speak the language to so many different people when the product expands in so many areas?
The short answer is it can't. And so we made a fundamental decision. I'm looking over here at the hybrid team. It's like, we can't possibly go and be authentic for every group who is active out there today. We were able to do it for the first two, definitely running and cycling. Those are the big markets. We needed to get that right. We then made a strategic change. This was about 2014, 2015, which is it'd be better for us to partner with those who are doing really authentic apps and services, and how can we help them be effective? So an example would be like a ski app. I don't know how many of you ski out there. I enjoy skiing in the winter. There's half a dozen great apps out there where you can track your skiing. You can track it on Strava, but we are not going to go into the detail that a skiing specific app will. Instead, we just want to make sure that they can integrate with Strava. And if there's a way that we can then push potential customers to them because we've got a large audience, let's figure out how to do it. So I think today, we're about 100, and you and I talked about this, about 110, 115,000 API partners at Strava today. It's a big app ecosystem. It's a lot of the brands and so forth. But the thesis was somebody out there is doing something really authentic for a community. How can we be helpful to them? And let's put the two together.
And can we speak a bit about how did the fitness and health market change since you started Strava to today? What have you been seeing in the market changing?
In some ways, it's what's changed and what hasn't changed. The biggest thing that I remember a chapter where we love to joke that our world is all about co-opeters. They really aren't competitors, but they're also not partners. You can use lots of different apps to track, but then we also work with them. And, it's a tricky space. And so we had a lot of competitors / co-opeters, that were getting acquired by the major brands. Runkeeper was acquired by Asics. MapMyFitness was acquired by Under Armour. Oh gosh, I'm blanking out all the different. Nike had their own native app. Like there were all these spaces, and they were all owned by now these big sort of fitness brands. And we were nervous internally. We're like, boy, they've got more marketing dollars and so forth. But the takeaway, and I think this is valuable for any of you, when you look at sort of these larger industries, at the end of the day, these big brands, they do one thing exceptionally well. In their case, they sell footwear and apparel. And that's a tough business in its own right. We don't want to be in the footwear and apparel business. We don't want to figure out how to manufacture shoes. And what we learned was that they didn't want to be in the digital business, or at least they weren't very good at it. They ended up turning a lot of our competitors into their marketing channels. And all of a sudden the consumer realized they were just being marketed to instead of actually getting a genuine experience from them. It's why Strava has remained independent, is that we like this idea of let's bring the brands onto the platform, but we don't want to be sort of slave to one, where now all of a sudden our consumer is the product. And we sort of seen this massive shift, or I think now we've actually watched the brands realize, when I say brands, the Nikes and Adidas and Under Armours and Lululemons of the world, realize they can leverage the Stravas and others to have an amazing online footprint, but they don't have to own it to do it. Be one example.
The other thing, Mark, I think I come from Cyprus. It's a very small island in the Mediterranean, and usually most of the trends do not hit the island. I remember since many years ago, people were running with Strava shirts everywhere. So what does it take to build a consumer brand that has so much loyalty?
Yeah, this is the other thing you and I were talking about offline this is one of the ones that I'm noodling over a lot, particularly with the advent of AI and how is that going to affect the way how would I start Strava today and build it, and what would I do differently if I had all the AI tools that are coming to market? This is one where I don't think I would change what we did. And what I often tell entrepreneurs is in the early days, you have to be comfortable doing things that do not scale. And so examples would be, we would show up at little tiny cycling and running events, and we would hand out lots and lots of t-shirts. We would literally hand out t-shirts, and at the same time, we would grab their Garmin off of their bike or off of their wrist, say, hey, we'll plug it into the back of this computer and you can see what it looks like on Strava. Now, we weren't going to go out and hire thousands of people to do that, but in the early days, to again create that loyalty, and we had this thesis that it's so expensive to go and acquire customers that if we could just get one customer on who was highly engaged and they could tell their friends, that would be a cost-effective way of growing. And in fact, if you look at Strava today, we're 16 years in, 97% of our growth is still completely organic. We add between 2 and 3 million members every month, and literally 97% of that comes through word of mouth. So we did things early on to go to these events, to set up pop-ups, to do, we did these crazy branding. I'll give you a funny example. We did something with Lululemon during a London marathon one time where they opened up they basically took over a pub that also they had a little sort of running store inside, or a little sort of Lululemon, store set up. Sorry, this wasn't Lululemon. It was New Balance, because they had the running store. It was New Balance opened the pub, and the only way that you could buy a pint of beer in that particular pub was by uploading a run and coming in and using the miles to pay for it, right? So we were just constantly looking for these creative in-person things that, again, they may not scale over time, but they create uniqueness in the market. They get this word of mouth going, and I'm no regret at that, because again, what we learned, the other lesson here, just real quickly, engagement trumps growth almost every time. Anytime Michael and I would focus on growth and try to look at all these growth drivers or think about growth marketing tactics, we would have a problem. So we might bump it for a little bit, but our retention was really, really bad. When we focused on engagement, I don't care whether your customer is an enterprise business or it is a consumer, it's one consumer. If you're focused on ensuring that one customer that you get stays excited and stays engaged with your product, they are your best source for future revenue.
The other couple of questions I wanted to ask you, Mark, is considering AI, what do you think is the future of communities? Are there going to be communities? Is this going to change a lot?
Yeah. So, yes, in part because I get to define community in my own sort of unique way, but it's a little bit what I touched on earlier. I think in consumer, one of the things we have to be mindful of is how we apply a lot of this amazing technology that's coming down the pipe, but in a genuine, authentic way where we still feel a good connection to it. So I keep referring to conversations you and I just had, where I see a lot of community thriving today is in real life, is in the person stuff. I mentioned earlier about the things that Strava does that doesn't scale. Ironically, we still show up even 16 years later, and with all the employees we have at the real life events, at the run events, at the cycling events, and not just sort of a big New York City marathon, which obviously we'll do, but in those Saturday morning fun runs or just a club So I believe community will thrive. In some ways, it will be the antidote to some of the AI and sort of what we're dealing with is sort of to have personal connection. I think it will be different. I think the way we define community over the last 15 years at Strava, where it's largely bringing this digital community together, we have to be mindful of sort of how does that continue to scale and yet feel authentic. But, no, I'm as excited about community building as I ever have been. What is the role of AI in the middle of that? That I'm not as sure. I can point to all the areas in Strava where we're applying AI. I don't think it's touching what I would define as community.
And then, if you are in the shoes of folks today, if you are 20 years old again and you wanted to start a business, or maybe would you start a business? And then if you would, what would that be?
Oh, well, there's already a domain name that's been created. So since I've retired from Strava, once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. So I'm already tinkering. And the good news now is that I have twin boys that are 24. So I am like recruiting hard to get them to be the entrepreneur. I can just sit back and watch. So I think it's amazing time. Yes, I want to keep building and keep just what you guys are doing. I'm just not sure I have the same energy that you do. But amazing time. And what excites me about it, I'll go back to my history. I mean, I was an art history major. I had no business running software companies. And so when I would come up with an idea, the first thing I had to do was I had to go convince really smart developers to come join me to go build it. At Kana, I mean, literally it was things like, we'll buy you free pizza. We'll get you great computers. Whatever it took. Strava was a little bit easier because we found a lot of great engineers who were also passionate about their cycling and running and so forth. And we had a track record that, got them excited about building. But when I think about this, I was playing with Claude the other day and you could almost argue that I wrote code. I mean, that was hilarious, but I mean, playing around, and I don't want to say I built another Strava, but it was pretty damn good. So I get really excited about what I started this conversation out with, which is the speed at which we can iterate and test and kind of play with. The one thing is just don't forget, don't do it in a vacuum. Don't do it just in your room. Go out and put it in front of real users. The number one thing, if you know who your audience is, go test it. Yeah, I can't emphasize that one enough. Is like, when I talk about speed, it's not just how fast something like an LLM can do some compute. I'm talking about how quickly then can we put that app in the hands of somebody and watch them use it. And what are they doing? What do they like and don't like? That has me excited.
I think I mentioned this earlier as well, but when it comes to storytelling, Mark, you are, if not the best in the world, one of the best in the world in this. So how would you advise people how to learn how to speak to customers, how to speak to investors, how to say the best stories? Okay.
So first off, there's some really great storytellers out there. So either you haven't met them or we're in serious trouble. And then the second thing I would say is probably the one thing I'm not doing tonight. I would give you my first piece of advice, which is I'm sitting up here talking and not necessarily listening. So, how do you become a great storyteller? Like, go out and listen. It relates to what I just said to you guys. Like, what worked for us? I'll tell another story. So I sat down with a expert in subscriptions. That Strava's business is all about a freemium model and subscriptions. So I sat down with one of the world's experts. She's written a bunch of books on the topic, and we met at a Starbucks. And she said to me, she asked the great classic question. So tell me about your target audience. Who are you going after? And it just so happened that there were 3 cyclists sitting over in a corner drinking some espresso. And I said, see those 3 over there? That's my target. And she turned around and said, man, 9 out of 10 times when I ask someone this, they say, oh, the beauty of our business is that anybody who's inside the Starbucks is a target. And she says, that scares me to death. But the fact that you picked just those 3 says volumes around sort of what the opportunity might be and how you can actually be successful. So, now why did I tell that stupid story? What was your question?
It's about storytelling.
Oh, storytelling. So why did I tell the stupid story? Because the one is, this concept of sort of being able to listen. Why was that 3 customers that were those cyclists good? Because I could go over and ask them just a few questions about their ride Case in point, what do we learn from cyclists very quickly? They love their climbs. Doesn't matter how long a ride is, they all obsess over that one climb in the middle of their ride. Why was that important to Strava? Because once we figured out how to auto-identify a climb, that was how segments were born. And once you have a Strava segment, turns out you can build a leaderboard. And once you have a leaderboard, now you have a reason to invite your friends on the Strava. So from a business perspective, when I talked about word of mouth, that's where the word of mouth comes from. Now you have all these people joining. So that all happened because sitting there talking to and listening to the cyclists, they told us about climbs. Sorry, we're getting way into the reeds of Strava. I probably don't even know what segments are, but that is an important part of our experience. So that's it. The other thing that's valuable, I don't know how to build your businesses. I'm not really good at giving advice, but I can tell you the stories that we've gone through all day long and maybe just take a piece of that that's relevant to what you're doing. And after 16 years at Strava, trust me, we got stories. Wrongful death lawsuits. We literally had just raised our first $3 million and we had to spend almost $2 million of that to defend ourselves against a wrongful death lawsuit. We were outed by a university student in Australia for outing all these secret military bases on our Strava heat map and got pulled in front of the U.S. Senate over that one. We've been investigated by the Federal Trade Commission. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So that's the other thing I'll tell you is like, whatever you think your business is going to be and where it goes, they're wildly different. So get ready for the ride. It's really fun.
With that, do you guys have questions? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I have a quick question. Can you share some of the biggest like experiments or wins that you ran for Strava, basically to optimize the engagement that you just said is like, I would assume one of your primary metrics that you look at to optimize the product, or if it's a different metric like that you use as a North Star, then experiments or wins that really boosted that. And any like one that you thought would boost it, but like
Yeah, so I'll give you three metrics that we look at. Two are obvious, which is in those first 7 to 10 days, how many people are they following and just connecting with, and how many uploads are they doing? How many times are they posting an activity? And if we can get 2 + 2, if we can get 2 followers and 2 uploads, we got a great shot at actually getting them engaged on Strava long term. There's a third metric that we actually think is really, really important, which is time active over time spent in app. And we have a personal mission to see that, basically that numerator, the time active increasing. The beauty of being a subscription business, we don't need you staring at the screen. We're not trying to sell an ad or anything like that. So whether you're in it for a minute or 10 minutes a day, not important to us. But if you're more active over time and we can see that you're actually spending more time doing your sport, whatever that might be, that ended up being good for us. So those were the metrics that we were trying to look at and play with. And so how do you do that, right? I mean, some of it's really simple. The 2 follows. Well, instead of asking you to put your whole contact database in the Strava, which feels kind of icky, I'll give you just one dumb story. In the app today, when you finish an activity, there's a little button that says add others. And more often than not, you've gone out on a ride. There's somebody who wasn't on Strava that you can do it. Boom, you add right there. So simple, it's authentic, it's just coming, it's an invite between the two of us, work really well. So it's those little examples, but I can tell you 9 more that didn't work, right? So.
Hi, I've been using Strava for like 30 years or so, but
OG, this is great.
And for consumer subscription, did you have a target of what percentage did you want to convert as paid users?
Yeah. In the freemium model, and I think this is changing and evolving, but definitely when we started, we kind of heard that the average was often fairly low, 3 to 5%. It was, something that a lot of people were fine with. We had an interesting problem at Strava. So sorry to give you guys a history lesson, but when we first launched, the way you could subscribe to us was not feature-based, it was usage-based. If you can do usage-based subscription, I highly recommend it, because in the early days of Strava, our conversion rate from free to paid was right around 30%, 10x what everybody. And the way you could do it was that you could upload to Strava 5 times a month for free, but the 6th time you had to pay. So when you can kind of build something that's very binary in there, look seriously at that. Because once we moved to feature-based, which we did once we launched our mobile app and we needed them to use it to record their activities, we decided to put the paywall based on features. Our conversion rates plummeted. Today we're pretty good. So if that 3 to 5% is decent, we'll keep it inside this room. Let's just say we're well north of 10%. Well north. And we would love to get that up. I think over time, if you were to talk to Mike Martin, who runs the company today, we would love to think that it might be possible to get 1 out of every 5, get to that 20% range. The holy grail is the Spotifys of the world that have that 50% type rate, depending on how you break it down. So there's a big range that's out there. I think at a bare minimum, you should be working between 5 and 10%. And almost more importantly, make sure that you understand why you're freemium. We are freemium because, as I mentioned earlier, our free members are extremely valuable to the Strava experience. I talk to a lot of folks where they have a freemium model, but their free member is nothing other than just a huge cost sink to their business. And so I always ask them, why aren't you subscription only? Put a trial in there, do something. But if your product's not good enough that they're not paying for it and they're not giving you anything in return, then you really have to ask yourself why you're freemium. Because once we launched the mobile app, we had this hard problem where somebody could use the mobile app to track their activity for 5 times. And then on the 6th time, there was going to be no way to track their activity. And that to us, we felt duplicitous on that. It was sort of like, it's one thing for you not to see all the great features, but another thing where you literally can't use our app anymore. So once we went to that, we realized we should go over now, mistake number 517 we made, we left way too many features on the free side of the paywall. Way too many. Everybody for years has said, you basically all told me just now, your free is great. That's why I don't have to pay for it. So, we know that. We're okay with that. We'll keep adding things to the paid side, but, that was why we did it.
Behind you? And behind you?
Oh, me? Yeah, sorry. That was a wonderful talk. I apologize for this one though. This one's gonna be a bit selfish. Instead of asking you, maybe for advice or something, I'm gonna ask you if you could do something for me. So I'm sorry if that's all right. But for our launch, first of all, I wonder what you think about this. For our launch, I'm gonna be running a 200K ultra and then live streaming it with a bunch of big founders like the president of Shopify, Dalton Caldwell, and a bunch of YC founders. And I'm putting the whole thing on Strava. So I was wondering if you'd like to join the live stream, if that's all right.
And start running?
Well, no, I mean, you could join it virtually. I'll be running.
Oh, when is it?
It's, it's Thursday, Friday, and then the live stream is this Saturday.
This Saturday. I don't see why not.
Sick. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Cool. Have fun. Other questions, guys?
I wanted to ask a question on the niche topic. Let's say that you're not a first mover. Part of being not a first mover is that you see what people like. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but if you were starting Strava today and you knew that there's cyclists, there's runners, and they all kind of want the same type of concept thing, would you still want to start with a niche? Or would you feel more comfortable now that there's all these platforms that are similar to it that offer kind of this functionality that that people want?
Yeah, it's probably totally unfair because I know I'm so biased on this. I still like the risk of being hyper focused. The thing I'm probably not articulating well is that it's how I want to go to market. So it's not what I ultimately want to build. It's how I want to get started. And so even looking out there at the world that is today, it's so hard to break through the noise, right? You said yourself, there's already so many platforms out there. And frankly, when we launched in 2009, we weren't the only game in town. I mean, there were a bunch of products out there. Most of them were run focused. So partly why we went cycling was everybody was going right. We're going left. Now it also turned out that cyclists were data geeks. They love their data. And so it was a much better audience to play with because we could do things with it. So even today, I think one of the hardest things that any of you have to do, we all do as entrepreneurs right now, is how do you break through the noise when it is so easy to bring things to market and so forth. And to to me, the power of the niche is that if I know who I'm going to speak to, then I can get in front of them and tell something compelling.
That's super fair. Thank you.
Hi. So you said before that one of your metrics is time active over time spent. And so that was a little bit unintuitive to me. Is it right to say that then you see Strava as a single player app in a multiplayer context? Because I see most of consumer apps that they really care about time spent to the point that they delegated content consumption, content creation to influencers. And so that's why you see, for example, on TikTok, on Instagram Reels, and they make an AI algorithm to pull from everybody. And so, yeah, I was curious about, how do you see Strava?
Yeah. Man, sharp. And so here's my quick response. One was, you heard me say 3 metrics, 2 of which you could argue were single player mode, the number of uploads and that time spent being active. But the other one was really important, the 2 follows. So, beginning to build your network. Our thesis in Strava is you don't need 150 or 200 people in your network. You need half a dozen. You need ultimately sort of 5 or 6 people that are active on it. But you are right. We also spent a lot of time, and this is where I'll point out, everybody wants to talk to Strava about community building. And what I have to remind them was when we launched, we had one customer. I can tell his name is David. I won't tell you his last name, but he lives in Palo Alto. He's about my age. He's been on Strava a little bit longer than yourself. He's been on Strava since 2009. He is a paying member, by the way. He's a subscriber. He loves us. And we had to figure out how to get him not just to upload once, but to upload again and again and again. If we're going to have engagement, we're going to get David to tell his friends to also join, then he had to have a single player mode that was really, really valuable and high utility. So I'm always quick to point out to entrepreneurs in the early stages, if you don't get that single player high utility mode right, there is no such thing as building community. I think it's a false premise. There's a lot of, the one that I was just reminded of the other day was it Clubhouse, or do you guys remember?
Yeah.
There's just, I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but given its rise of fame, and it's like when you're trying to build community in the earliest days, it's fraught with risk. It's not dissimilar to thinking about the niche versus the mass audience. So at Strava, and still today, if you talk to our product teams, some of them are in single player mode, very much focused on like your personal profile and fitness and so forth. And others are very focused on multiplayer or the community side of the business. But I don't think it's one or the other.
Thank you.
Maybe it's further back.
Hey, Mark. So with Strava kind of being made possible initially by like the breakthrough in like GPS technology and like the accessibility of data that came with it, what do you think is like the next, big technology innovation or like breakthrough that might evolve fitness or change the way that we think about fitness?
Well, there's a couple things that I like. We're all here for an AI conference, so that would be the easy one. And actually, I like, as someone who's no longer involved in the daily operations, but it's a user just like the rest of you, we have that athlete intelligence on Strava that surprisingly good. For a first iteration, like I'm having fun seeing what things like AI are actually sort of surfacing for us as users on Strava. If you don't know what it is, anytime you post to an activity to Strava now has a little segment. It's called Athlete Intelligence, and it gives you a summary, and it'll tell you things. I got all excited because it told me the other day, hey, that was the longest mountain bike ride you've done in the last year on Strava. I wouldn't have been able to go back and look for that. So that was, but those are sort of nice to haves. I think where I'm excited, I'll give a shout out to Hybrid here because I was asking him the question earlier before the conference. How are you collecting information? I think there's some really cool stuff that's coming around the ability to, I don't have my Aura ring on here, but whether it's the Aura ring that we're wearing or it's the various sort of devices that are becoming integrated, the CGMs, for those you don't know, the glucose monitoring systems, we're scratching the surface. I am fortunate enough to meet with tons of entrepreneurs right now that are doing cutting edge work around really getting the next level of data extraction from performance, from working out. And with that data, I think we'll be able to do some really cool stuff. So I like what I'm seeing on that front, whether it's a wearable or it's integrated on the body or it's literally just a patch and so forth. That's pretty cool. It unlocks. In Strava's case, we've always said, Again, we don't want to be in that side of the business. Let the experts go do it, and we'll aggregate it and do some fun things with it. Yeah.
So earlier you mentioned a little bit about how like the relationships between people and sports are very different, like country to country. And you said that like when you switched to running, for example, or you added running, like in order to kind of figure out what like those customer wants and needs are, like you hired like running experts and people who actually like love to run. How did you go about this like country to country? Cause I guess you can't like hire someone from every country. So like what was your like approach to, kind of, I guess, customizing that based off of like location and really making the product like super personable?
Yeah. So part of it is actually hiring. So if you look at Strava today, we definitely have, in our key markets, of which there's maybe 10 to 12, there are people who are there, they're on the ground, and they're our greatest listeners. Second thing is, get ready to travel. While I was running Strava, I was all over the planet, and spending a lot of time with users anywhere I would go. Some amazing experiences. If you ever get a chance, Brazil, particularly if you're a runner, it is wild. I mean, literally, they do all their running at night. They run in groups of 200. They carry boom boxes on their shoulders as they're going. And it's like a party going down the street. It's cool and it's safe. And so that's when they're out having fun. So I got to go do that. And that's what I mean. Like you go and you listen and you just hear these subtle little things, understanding that club dynamic that exists in a place like Rio or Sao Paulo. Very different from the very staid UK who are passionate about their clubs. Totally different. So on the ground and going out there. This is again where you might marry that with AI, but there's nothing better than looking at it, feeling it, being there and being part of it. So I would encourage all of you to get out of your offices and go visit with your customers, whether they're right next door or you have to fly. Look at this guy, right? Starts out of Greece. And I mean, here and, we were talking to others who are moving to be in the San Francisco. Yeah. Go where the action is. Sometimes it's to build the company, but sometimes it's to go talk to the customer.
Thank you.
I have a question about like the social media aspect, following up on an initial question. So I'm not sure if like you say that Strava is a social media app, but there definitely are a lot of social aspects. And then on the other side of that, there's always a lot of controversy around social media and like the negative aspects to it. And like I love Strava. I use it a lot. But there definitely are like negative aspects and people saying, oh, like, why do I need to log my activity on Strava to say that it exists? So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. My first response is I think we've grown comfortable with the idea that we are within that sphere of social media. We tried for a long time to avoid it. We didn't want to be known that way as a social network or something like that because we could see the negative connotations that were coming from it. I would say we have worked hard to keep the experience somewhat monolithic. If you're posting on Strava, you're posting about your activities. You're sharing those activities and you're celebrating those activities with each other. And if politics starts to show up in the feed or something like that, it's not that we're actively sort of censoring it, but we've tried to build almost like a community policy where, hey, this isn't the place for that. There's plenty of other sort of platforms where you're welcome to do that and you should. But why would you want to do it on Strava? So it's one part sort of just policy and just sort of training behavior over time, to try to keep it in that place where we're there to support each other. It goes back to our primary mission, right? Like I said, we really believe that being active is a good thing. And it's really hard to do. And that when you have friends who can support you in it, then good things happen. And so we've kept to that. Do we run up against negative stuff on there? 100%. One of the biggest conversations we had with our new CEO, he came over from YouTube where he was running commerce and he was scared to death just because he saw how little we had invested in sort of safety and privacy and so forth. We had, but not to the scale that a YouTube does. And there are bad actors on Strava. There are people who just do dumb stuff. They'll name segments in the worst possible ways, or they'll, or frankly, what's even worse, because it's location-based social media, something like stalking or, something like that. We're hyper cognizant. I'm looking at you just asked a question. So when we added running, we went from a user base. We haven't talked about this, but the gender difference. So cyclists, it was 90-10. As soon as we added running, turns out the majority of runners in the world are women. Now it's not 90% the other way. It's like 56 and 44, whatever it is, but there's more women runners in the world. And so we quickly now today, Strava is 50-50. It's a gender balance, but the needs are very different. You go out and want to go on a run. I can almost guarantee your experience and mine are different. I worry about, do I have enough clothing on that I'm going to stay warm or cool? I'm not worrying about who might be running behind me or something like that. We are very cognizant that that's not true for everybody. And we could get into long conversations, whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about gender and so forth. But we've had to dig in and understand that. And we think that's part of the social responsibility as well. So sorry, kind of get me off on a tangent, but it is complicated. And we've embraced social media as sort of its place, but we feel like Strava is serving a vertical.
Thank you.
So let's do the last two questions, guys.
Cool. Hey, Mark, I just had a quick question. What advice as a founder do you have for using like fitness and activity to boost better productivity and work and kind of thinking as a whole?
Yeah. Well, so here's a funny one in here. So we have, Strava has something called the ABCs, kind of our core values: authenticity, balance, camaraderie, commitment, and, camaraderie. We had 3 C's. See, this is how you retire and you forget all this stuff. Camaraderie, commitment, and craftsmanship. Craftsmanship. Let's do it well if we're going to do it. And the balance one was always around, hey, you know what? There's always time for a ride or a run. And we really do believe that. If you ever come and visit Strava's office, one of the problems is it often smells like a locker room. Cause if you've got a free hour between 10 and 11, you're probably out on a run and you're coming back and you're not changing and you're not showering. You're just going to your next meeting. So we have inspired that in our own team. We believe in it. We think it actually works well for us. And I can tell you, we've had long conversations in the boardroom, like, are you guys moving fast enough? Are they working hard enough? Are they working, and there's always that tension that's there. So I happen to be a big believer that, I almost like sometimes to reverse priority. If I can take care of the team, and all of you guys should think about this. If you're truly the entrepreneur and you're running your business, you cannot do all the functions in the company. One of the things that I figured out real fast is, again, art history major with no technology experience. I'm not going to be writing code. Turns out that my sales guys realized I would give everything away for free, so they wouldn't let me in the room. I can't market to save my life. So I better go figure out how to set the vision and then go recruit the very best people that I can. And then once I've got a great team in place, let them ride. And what does that mean? That means get them the resources they need. Let them have the time that they need in a very selfish way. If I allow you that extra hour, whether it's to go work out or go to a doctor's appointment or pick your kid up from school because he's sick today and he needs it, it's selfish because I know if I let you do that, when you come back, 100% of your time is going to be on Strava. Whereas if I'm constantly pushing you, hey, no, you can't have you do that. Your brain is halfway with me and halfway with your child or the fact that you haven't run for 3 days. That doesn't work. So I've got an extreme bias on, let me take care of the team. Go find the very best people and be ruthless. By the way, it means I'm 50-50. I hire great half the time and I totally miss the other half the time. You have to acknowledge when you're going to miss, make the change and move on. It's okay. You can't bat 1,000. Nobody does. So I am accountable. I hold my team accountable. Hey, this is what I've hired you to do and let's go be great. But I assume they're going to be great and then put them in there. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Last question is? Choose anyone you want to.
Thanks. Hi, Mark. Thanks so much for your time tonight. I just wanted to ask about the way in which you kind of think about. You've given quite a few examples of decisions that you've made throughout your time at Strava. And one thing I kind of noticed implicitly is your kind of focus towards the user experience and doing what's right for the user, in regards to, for instance, making it a freemium model, making it, like a few examples, and remaining independent and not using it as a marketing channel. I just wanted you to touch on a little bit about thinking about aligning your interests with the users, as opposed to, comparisons have been made to Strava as a social media platform. But I think traditional social media platforms, the interest of the platform misaligns with that of the user. So I was just wondering if you could touch and maybe give some examples about that.
Yeah, it's a great one. And, you can clearly see some amazing companies that exist in this valley where they build a user experience, but their monetization model, their business model is connected to a different set of customers. So I am not here to lay judgment on that. I'll give you two reasons why we don't do that. One is Michael and I won't speak for Michael, I'll speak for myself. I am a simpleton. I like simple. And for me, simple is, let me go build something that's really good for a customer. And if it's good enough, they'll pay me for it. That was kind of thesis going all the way back to, frankly, even before 2009, when Michael and I were talking about starting another company. One of the things we did was we sat down, story time again. We sat down in 2006. We were in Vail, Colorado, because he was on the East Coast, I was on the West Coast. So we met in the middle of the country. We spent 2 days in this little townhouse out in Colorado. And we didn't know what we were going to start, but we wanted to start something. And one of the exercises we went through was we made a list of all the companies we wished we'd founded. And it turned out very few of them were actually Valley-based companies. They weren't technology companies. They tended to be these great sort of iconic consumer brands that had oftentimes been around for decades. It was companies like Virgin or Starbucks, or my personal favorite was this company called Oakley. If you remember the Oakley sunglasses, I could go on for hours on sort of that amazing business. Better margins than any software company. It's incredible. So we had all these great consumer brands. And Michael and I said, man, wouldn't it be, we did this enterprise software thing, Kana, and it'd been really good. And it was like, could we go do consumer? And if we do consumer, then don't we want to sort of build a brand that can be trusted? We used to joke about kind of the tattoo brand, the brand that everybody loves so much that they would literally tattoo it. By the way, you can find Strava tattoos now on people. In fact, there's actually people who've named their babies Strava. It's crazy out there. So that was as much sort of a personal desire. I'll give you another brand that Michael and I, and you can love us or hate us, both of us are big Porsche fans. 911 is an iconic car, right? The idea of sort of applying Strava and thinking about it is, hey, could it be as important a piece of gear as somebody's bike or their running shoes? Can we do that? And in doing that, will they pay us for it? That's where we started. That was kind of our DNA and was what got us excited. And that combined with just keeping it simple, when you build something for the person who's going to pay for it, guys, that's where you really figure out real quick whether you got a business or not. Whereas if you're trying to build this thing over here in the hopes that you get enough eyeballs that now you can go build this ad business, those are tricky. Now, technology space required us to think about freemium. Today you really have 3 ways. You can either do e-commerce, you can do ads, or you can do subscription, right? It's not like there's 10 choices out there, but for us, we really like that direct to consumer pay.
Mark, it's been an incredible discussion. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.